Well, 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 another Korean MMO. You know what? This is looking pretty good. Just look at those visuals. Oh, they can be a furry too? Okay. And there it is. Pay to win. Do I even bother at this point? Yeah, okay, let's break it down. It wasn't all terrible. Throne and Liberty is getting its worldwide release this September. And I hadn't heard a thing about this MMO at all prior to the open beta that ran this last week. I jumped into this game wide-eyed and ready to grind. And I had some mixed feelings about the game's overall gameplay loop and systems, but found myself having a great time by the 20-hour mark. But that's now largely soured since I learned about the dev's monetization strategy. But the game is free to play, so is there any fun to be had here? Starting out in Thrones and Liberty throws you into a tutorial that made me want to blow my brains out, quite honestly. You're instantly set on by an enemy, given 5 or 6 combat abilities, and you start fighting. I don't hate a mandatory tutorial, but if I'm playing an MMO, I'm usually playing it for the MMO aspect, you know, the massively multiplayer part. I think back to Season of Discovery starting in WoW, getting on the first day and being in a sea of people, barely able to see the next quest drop because of long lines, or needing to fight over single spawns. I don't want to have to run through a solo experience, that's not why I'm here. But it does teach you the basics of combat, lets you decide on your camera style, and the game looks gorgeous. I'm going to say that a few times here because from a visual aspect, the game looks insane. Very well polished, and the servers all held up well. I've heard mixed feedback in the community on the combat system. To me, it's passable. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it. And I'll break that down more soon. But what I appreciate is that there are abilities you can dodge by moving. There is the parry mechanic indicated by a circle that closes in on certain attacks, and overall the animations look smooth enough. I was taken back by how many abilities I had access to immediately, and this leads to a trapping many MMOs fall into. Within the first 20 minutes of the game, during and after I left the tutorial, I was bombarded with information. Combat information, progression systems, the story going full speed on me right from the beginning. Throne Liberty doesn't do onboarding very well at all. I could have taken time to sit down and read the various abilities it gave me. I could have sat down to read through all the tooltips on the progression systems, to read all the lore information coming at me, but Jesus fuck, I just started. Let me go kill some boars or help an old woman pick an apple or something. I'd much rather learn by doing out in the world, and pick things up as I need them. I honestly had no clue what my skills really did for the first hour. I never stopped to read them in detail because just look at how much detail there is. And most of it is fairly irrelevant. So let's start there, on combat and skills. Throne Liberty doesn't have a specific class or race system. You get thrown into a detailed character creator, but your character has no bearing on your skills or proficiencies. They're the aesthetic, and that's fine. Instead, your class and abilities are determined by your selected weapon. Healers will need to take the wand, tanks, the sword and shield or greatsword, and so on. There are classes here, but anyone can be any class at any time. All you need to do is swap out your weapon for another, and I'm on the fence about systems like this. Actually, I lean away from them. I really enjoy class identity in MMOs. I want tanks to have their roles, healers and DPS to have their reason for being. When my single character can do it all, why would I ever make another one? It shortens the world for me and makes the game smaller in scope. I'll never make 2 characters in Throne and Liberty because I can level all class types from the one. But I do appreciate that the game makes this easy. You can have different skill pages, different item loadouts, and different skill distributions you can swap between so you aren't constantly reallocating when you want to switch. Skills are tied entirely to the weapons you select. Every wand will use the same skills, every person everywhere using a wand will likely be using the same subset of skills. You are given 2 weapons to hold at a time, so you have 2 sets to choose from. So there will be some variety between players, but most often you'll see the same skills in practice. I was taken back by having so many available to me right out of the gate. I much prefer to gain skills over time rather than having so many because I never really felt like I got the time to learn them, and it never felt worth my time stopping to do so, which might sound odd. But given the cooldowns associated with the skills, I would just find myself through the mid-game cycling through all of them. What's the point in choosing carefully which skill to use when the enemy is tank enough that in many cases I was cycling through every skill in the bar twice before killing them? I wasn't thinking about how I should ignite early, get damage over time, because it was negligible in the overall fight. I did enjoy the combat system. It's in-depth enough with the parry mechanic that I felt engaged, but after 20 hours, it was starting to feel stale. I largely played a mage character who can free some enemies, but I was struggling to feel much class difference. Playing an archer felt very the same. Melee, again similar, you just up close. Everything started to devolve into, what's coming off CD now? Okay, use that. How about now? Yep, next ability. Time to parry. Oh, what's next on the CD? There's no real opportunity to be a fire mage or an ice mage, or a trapper versus a traditional archer, or a crowd controller versus a general tank. They all tend to morph into one another, with some having certain advantages over another, but there is very limited class identity, which combines with the fact that you are any class anytime you want, which brought me down to feeling like I was simply just a power level. I couldn't express much skill as a healer, as a DPS, or a tank. Skill progression is a simple stat increase. Again, no real augments as to how they play differently to another player. Later in the game, traits become an endgame chase and grind, which have some impact on gameplay to differentiate yourself from others, but that still remains significantly limited in scope. I should highlight, I did enjoy the combat enough. Movement felt fluid, animations were fine, visuals overall are good, but it pales in comparison to other games like WoW or even Lost Ark. I mentioned that you're often just rotating through skills, which yes, is the MMO experience, but it wasn't just a rotation to keep dot damage ticking or a rotation to enable CC or increase healing. It's a rotation because everything else is on cooldown, essentially rotating between whatever is up before a more damaging ability is ready again. It didn't have the same feeling of other MMOs in which I was actively making decisions to root, slow, hard CC, tank, heal, buff, or debuff. It just felt the same as I reached level 50. I was thoroughly enjoying the game between levels 10 to 40 because of just how gorgeous the world is. Quest design is what you'd expect from an MMO. I was impressed by the cutscenes and the dialogue and the way the game will narrate to you what's just occurred, which you can skip, but I really enjoyed the immersion once I got over the initial shell shock of being hit with it all at once. Exploring new areas and being given a brief rundown of the new zone when clicking a waypoint, its history, why a desert looks this way when not long ago it was a sprawling farmland, it adds depth to the world that was holding my attention quite steadily. Main quests lead you through the world and open up side quests, objectives, tick box exercises that I was enjoying as they all fed into the progression system. The dungeons you experience later into the game really began to showcase what this game has to offer. Those I played were well designed, but felt a little empty in some spaces. It's possible later dungeons make up for that, but I did enjoy the boss mechanics at play requiring team play. In this fight, this Chimera, when it jumped into the middle, would AoE until 4 pillars were activated to shut it down. This required us to really communicate and coordinate who would hit each switch. There is a good basis here for fun combat and player cooperation. But let's do it. Let's bite the bullet and talk about monetization. There's quite a few paths the game takes to monetize, but it all boils down to this. You use real money to buy their in-game currency. This then allows you to purchase a variety of items, including from other players, but the main talking point is that yes, you can buy power. Not directly, but you buy the materials needed to upgrade your character growth stones, and those traits I mentioned earlier that provide significant endgame power. I mentioned upgrading skills as a straight stat upgrade. This is how progression is handled in a number of ways. Armor can be collected and then upgraded in the same way skills are, weapons in the same, you need to find or buy your base type, and then pump upgrade materials into it. This system is fine. I much prefer finding new items, crafting new items, and being able to craft onto them, but it is centered around finding materials in Throne of Liberty. But why do you need to spend money? Why not just grind? Well, this is where we come to the classic time gating that we see in MMOs of this style, encouraging you to spend more money to speed up your progression. Overall, it seems similar to Lost Ark in that sense. If you played to the endgame of Lost Ark, you'll know what I mean. You suddenly hit a wall in which progression means waiting on resets or dipping into your wallet. This goes further, completing dungeons requires tokens, and you only get a limited amount per day, per week, or you can just purchase them in the shop. They're in the fucking shop, because of course they are. Now, I was actually really keen for this game. I was interested to get it day one, get into a guild or get one going, really push to be part of that first wave of players tackling hard content. But now I imagine we'll see a bunch of guilds expecting free-to-play players to keep up with those spending or get kicked. There won't be any satisfaction for me to keep going once I hit what is clearly the paywall. Gear leveling, skill leveling, gear trading, runs per day all benefit directly and indirectly from spending. You do need to play to get access to other materials, but in the leveling from 1 to 50 I've just done in the beta, the only items I was ever short on were those I could buy with real money. Funny how that works. It's exactly what happened to me in Lost Ark. I had an awesome time playing through to the endgame, I hit it, and then after a week of doing daily dungeons and seeing barely any progression, I left it behind. Initially when I jumped into that game I thought, well, I just won't spend. But then you start getting into the general toxicity it creates when you aren't spending but others are. It instantly kills my interest in any kind of PvP. It's like when a shooter becomes infested with cheaters, right? You die, you think, fuck, I must have had aimbot, when in reality you were face down arse up looting. But the point is, you think about it every time, because it's a known possibility. Why on earth would I ever take part in PvP in Throne of Liberty when I know that my enemy could have swiped his card and made himself functionally immortal next to me? Every death I'm going to think about it. so I know I won't do more than a session or two of PvP. Now a free-to-play player can eventually catch up, but I can't imagine how much longer that grind is, and are you going to have fun, getting stomped into the ground by whales until the day you can catch up and hit the peak? There may be some merit to the large-scale PvP battles, which this game is centered around, but if a free-to-play guild goes up against one that spends, how do you think it'll go? Who wins that fight? And the game incentivizes guilds to get to the top with leaderboard rankings and a castle that the top guild on the server can take and defend, that rewards them with tons of the game's free and paid currencies. So do you think your free-to-play guild has a chance? Or do you think the guilds trying to vie for that spot are going to have space open for free players? Probably not. I didn't get to experience much PvP in my time with the beta, so I can't give you a good critique on it. Unfortunately, there wasn't a dedicated Australian server, so I played through with lag, making PvP largely unplayable. But the pay-to-win aspects really do tell me what I need to know. If you spend, you'll win. If you don't, you'll likely lose. In large-scale battles, this might be more balanced if both sides happen to have a similar free versus paid player distribution, but it kills the idea for me. Tell me what you think in the comments on that one, because I am generally curious. Would you still enjoy the larger battles as a free player? It begs the question, unless you're going to go hard as shit from day one, do your dungeon runs every single day and farm your ass off, is the game worth it for a free player? A lot of this game's endgame is focused on big guild activities, those dungeon runs and grinds like all MMOs, and for me, I don't see myself sticking with it. And because I know I won't be able to take full advantage of those endgame activities, because I know I'll be frustrated trying to get into groups when my gear score is a little lower than others, because PvP will feel soulless with the paid advantage in the back of my mind, I just can't bring myself to tell you to invest your time in the game. Is it a problem if you do? Absolutely not. And if on Throne Liberty's full Western release, if there is nothing in my library I want to play, I may jump in for a weekend or two with friends to take in the visuals, fight some bosses and enjoy some grind like I did in Lost Ark. But knowing that the grind I put in is going to hit a wall doesn't fill me with a lot of excitement. The devs, NC Soft, were known for some incredible old school games, but they have tanked their reputation over more recent years with numerous releases of mobile trash, a lack of polish in their games, and a complete lack or disinterest in what their players actually want, instead forcing in more and more monetization. I do personally think this game would pop off if they removed all of those paid systems and tweaked drops to compensate. Remove the limits on dungeon runs or increase how many can be done at the very least. Time-gated farming is fine, but if you let some people pass the gate, you've ruined its whole purpose, and in this case, for a little extra cash in the short term. With the ability to morph into different animals and the general look of the game, I think they could have made bank with a cosmetic shop. Extra morphs, emotes, all that shit. I'm dying for an MMO that I can grind hours into. After the rocky start of Throne Liberty, I was enjoying the mid-game, the leveling process, I was being a completionist and ticking off every side mission, gathering items and pages to fill out the codex and all that tick box stuff. I was having a good time. I remember it being the exact same for me in Lost Ark. Having a blast, and then you hit the point where the game is designed for you to disconnect and go find your bank card. It kills the spark. Throne Liberty is a decent product. The combat, storytelling and visuals had me sold and ready to invest, but the monetization strategy instantly sent me out the door, and that's a shame. It's hard to watch these games repeatedly come out with the same strategies, fail to make a mark, and then go back to the same practices. But if they find enough whales, it'll be worth it to them. Thank you for checking out this video. How do you feel about games like Throne Liberty and Lost Ark? Are you happy to pay to play? Do you enjoy the free experience? Or do you just skip them altogether? As always, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to help me out, but you being here, that's more than enough. I'll see you in the next one.